Hi, this is Pastor Josh here on Monday. This is March the 30th, 2020. We're in the midst of our Corona quarantine here. And I had this thought the other day that I wanted to convey to you about how to find hope. How to find hope in hopelessness. Sometimes it feels like the longer we live or the further we get into stuff like this virus, that we just get hit with more disappointing news. We may hear one thing one day and we get our hopes up slightly only to have them dashed the next day by something else that we hear. It may seem like hopelessness is in every direction, or at least hopelessness is communicated from every direction. In 1 Kings chapter 19, there was a guy who was experiencing something similar in the way hopelessness was communicated. He was receiving hopeless news in a very powerful fashion, and then it got lodged into his brain, and he could not shake the hopeless circle of communication. He had received the information, and he just kept going over it in his mind over and over and over again, and it consumed his ever-waking thought, and he begged for God to kill him. He begged for the end of his life, and he ran and he ran. And this wasn't just a guy, that we see, at least in Scripture, struggle with this a lot. He may have, we don't know. But what we see is a man who had great faith, a man who other people looked up to, a man who the nation looked up to as what a follower of God was supposed to look like. And here he is in secret, in quiet, struggling in great depth with hopelessness and what to do. And so this guy, his name was Elijah, he runs away and he hides in a cave. And he's there in the cave, and he has this thing that he'd planned out that he was going to say to God. And so he said it to God. He prayed it. And in that moment in the cave, there was this great wind that blew by. And all this time he's listening for God's voice. And this massive wind, like the power of a tornado, blows by. And the Scripture says God's not in the tornado. His voice wasn't in the wind. And then a huge earthquake shakes the entire mountain and the cave he's in. And he anticipates God being God and as great as he is to speak to him through the earthquake. But the Scripture says God was not in the earthquake. And then a huge fire rages across the mountain. A fire. This guy had association with fire and God's power just from not very long before this passage of Scripture in 1 Corinthians 19. He called fire down from heaven as a show of God's strength. But God was not in the fire. And then the Scripture says that there was a low whisper. You know what that literally means? It means the sound of silence. The sound of silence. And it was even more amplified by the fact that he had just had a huge wind, a huge earthquake, and a huge fire, all of which are very loud things. And now he experiences the sound of silence. And from the sound of silence, God speaks. And at this moment, God speaks to him and gives him purpose, gives him a mission. And he goes out to fulfill this mission. So he walked into the cave filled with hopelessness. He listens through the sound of silence and receives an incredible amount of hope that lasts him the rest of his life. And this is reiterated to us in Psalm 46, a verse that I mentioned Sunday, or a chapter that I mentioned Sunday in the message. But I mentioned Psalm 46, verse 1, God is my refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Well, if you jump down to verse 10, you get another very famous passage, a line, a phrase. It says, be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am God. You see, for Elijah, hope came through the silence. And in Psalm 46, we read, be still and know that I am God. And the struggle is a lot of times we have a hard time being still. Even if we're physically still, we have a hard time stilling our mind. It's why we immediately plop down and we want to stream something or binge something to keep our mind occupied so we're not caught up in the barrage of our own thoughts. Or why we mindlessly scroll through social media because we don't want to take a moment and really think about what is happening. But it's in the stillness, it's in the silence that hope comes. It's in the stillness, it's in the silence that the voice of God speaks powerfully. And so here's a challenge for today and on into tomorrow, depending on when you watch this. Take a moment and just be still and find hope in the voice speaking through the sound of silence. And so I hope you will join us again in future videos. Throughout this week, we're going to be doing some more videos, some more how-to videos like this one, how to find hope. We're going to how to find faith, how to find peace. We're going to have several of these videos throughout this week. So check back with us in those. But again, take this challenge of be still and find hope in the sound of silence. And I'll catch you in the next one.